We're live.
We're live. Yeah?
Yes.
I'm moving as I see myself.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm on?
That means you're very much live. Alive and live.
I'm alive and live.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start again, shall we? One question was from Rocio, how do we stop criticizing ourselves? So I said exactly the same as we do any other. That's why you first have to some focus. Then you have to be able to notice your thoughts, and then you argue with them. That really is what practice is, but it's just hard because it's 1,000 thoughts a second. Do you hear me? This is why you see, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, okay, this is the job of being a Buddhist. But in a sense, the Buddha is saying this job is so hard because we're so addicted to the old habits that our minds aren't strong enough to do it without lots of other practice. So, I like to use the analogy. Let's say you go to the basketball. You see these amazing people flying up and down the court, putting in the balls in the hoop, backwards, upside down, without thinking. It looks brilliant, right? You go, oh wow, please show me how to get the ball in the hoop. Oh, I'd love to do that. Then Michael Jordan, well, probably not Michael Jordan anymore, but Michael Jordan says, well, okay, you got to go and spend a few years studying baseball theory, and you got to go jogging, you got to go on a diet, you got to learn this, you got to do that, you got to strengthen your muscles, you got to do this, and you say, no, Michael, you didn't hear me. I want to get the ball in the hoop, and you repeat his answer because you got to get the point. It looks brilliant. That's the end result of years and years and years of practice, isn't it? Because that's the actual job of basketball. The actual job is getting the ball in the hoop. Running and jogging don't seem to be the point, but they're the things that prime your body and your mind to be able to get it in the hoop effortlessly. So working on your mind is the job of being a Buddhist, but our minds are so deluded. We're so habitually ridiculous. We're so blaming the outside world. I mean, you talk Buddhists among Buddhists each other, and go to Buddhist centers, they've been Buddhists for 30 years, and then they are arguing, blaming each other. It's not that easy to stop blaming. It's not that easy to change these habits. We should be very humbled by that because this is the heaviest, hardest job to do. I mean, Lama Zopa says, this sounds very shocking. The vast majority of humans on the planet, and this includes all the intelligent ones, have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. In other words, we are so primordially addicted to believing the outside world is the source of happiness and the source of suffering, and that's our philosophy, that's our culture, that we don't even know what's going on. We not only do not know that what goes on in our mind plays a role, we therefore don't even know what goes on in our mind. So we're primordially ignorant. And it's not being arrogant about it. Look at the human world. Look at the human race. Look at our suffering. Look at how we blame everybody. Look at how we all blame ourselves. Either way, we're completely addicted to delusions. So what's the analogy here mean? That means this is where in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that they even talk about preliminary practices. You do your nondro, isn't it? That's preliminary practices. So you got to do years and years of practice of doing all these different practices related to the Buddha, because it's something, and this is where it sounds very religious and very but because the mind is so habitually deluded, and because it's so hard to do this work, our minds, we've got to prime our minds and our body by doing lots of other practices that prepare us to be able to do the job in day-to-day life. And that's why if you have any practice, you do your practice every day, you do your purification, you do this, you do your visualization, you do your mantras, because they purify your mind at a very deep level. They enable you to do the job of being your own therapist. Do you understand? The actual job is this, but it's the hardest job we'll ever do. We can start somewhere. We've got to start somewhere, So one way of framing all this is, as I've mentioned briefly already, the Buddha's approach to the mind is so specific. It's that these deluded states of mind are in their nature deluded. They're delusional, they're neurotic, they're absurd. They are actually misconceptions deep in our bones. But this is very hard to hear. So especially the one of anger and blame. I mentioned this yesterday when I talked about this, when I gave the example of these young Tibetan women, young nuns. I remember I mentioned yesterday, in 2003, Richard Gere invited the Dalai Lama to New York. And because I'd been working with prisoners at the time, he also invited me and a few other people working with people in prisons, and he invited 20 former prisoners to come and meet the Dalai Lama. We had a really wonderful day. And he also invited these two young Tibetan nuns who'd been sexually abused and tortured in prison in Tibet. So so this is where, if you want to take the big picture in Buddhism, the big picture includes the view of karma. You know, from the Tibetan Buddhist point of view, all of this is Buddhist teaching. It's coming from India, but it's really extant and strong in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. You study the philosophy. You don't just go there and watch your breath. That's how Buddhism's filtered down to the world. That's okay, what to do. People think Buddhism's being mindful. That's about it. Well, it's kind of like a millionth of a percent of it. What are you being mindful for? So you can see your mind. What do you want to see your mind for? Because the mind's full of delusions and they cause you suffering. So you want to get rid of the delusions. So that comes down to the essence of it. It is the essence of it. But there's so much more to it. There's this world view of the Buddhas and his bigger picture view of the mind and where it comes from aren't just interesting intellectual theories that you sit on, that you go and learn in a university and you pass your exam in philosophy. They actually, you know, the bigger way of saying what you're doing, practicing Buddhism, is internalizing those views and making those views your way of interpreting your life and the life of others. So basically, really, what if you could say being a Buddhist means you learning the Buddhist worldview and you're buying into it. You make a decision to buy into it. Okay, you don't have to. You can be a 1% Buddhist. You can be. No one's forcing you to swallow what Buddha says whole. No one's even forcing you to buy into it and to listen to it and think about it and analyze it. But if you want to look at the big picture in Buddhism, in order to get to the end result of becoming a Buddha, Sangye, ridding the mind of all the rubbish and growing all the goodness, you've got to have the whole deal. It's a highly evolved, whole, entire world view. So the crucial component here, that is this view of karma, where this mind of ours comes from. What is it? Where does it come from? Why do we get born in this way? I mean, it's the bigger picture point of view. So the view of karma is crucial to really take this stuff on board. You can only go so far by observing your mind. So, for example, these two young nuns are an example. So, as I mentioned yesterday in the story, there they are, brought up as Buddhists, brought up with this worldview. It's just in their bones. They've been for 1,200, 1,300 years. Buddhism has been the view of the universe in Tibet. 99% of people were Buddhists, right? So the view of karma was just the view that they saw, that was just the way they learned. And you learn it and internalize it and you live and you apply it in your life. So this really demands we look more deeply into attachment and anger, which are the main voices of ego grasping, which are these basically philosophical positions. They're basically assumptions. They're philosophical positions. What the Buddha is saying is every mind in the universe, every sentient being, so forget all the animals, just look at the humans. Everybody's got a view about things. Everything that goes on in our mind is a viewpoint. Everything in our mind is a viewpoint. We don't think of it that way. Okay, before I even go further, let me go back to an example. When you study the mind in Buddhism, you study the epistemological model of the mind as well as the psychological model. And what we're describing here is a psychological model, a little bit looking at the contents of our mind. But the other one is really fascinating, very fascinating. It's the way the mind actually functions. It's very fascinating. So here, I'll just use an example, and it shows the point I'm making. It's always the same example I use, Let's say you see me pick up this cup and I look with my eyes and I'll make an announcement and I will say, that's a really nice mug. So naturally, we will assume that my eye consciousness is seeing a nice mug, a really beautiful, a well-designed mug. We think my eyes are seeing that. Naturally, because we live with our sensory consciousness, don't we? We live with our sensory consciousness. I'll hear one note of that trumpet and I'll go, wow, that's Miles Davis. Amazing. So we naturally assume my ear consciousness is cognizing Miles Davis and that he is amazing. But that's a load of rubbish. That's utter nonsense. It's not true. I mean, speaking very simply, the way the Buddha describes how the mind functions, we have sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. So sensory consciousness is that part of my mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the 5 senses. The eyeball, the nerves all working, the eyelid open, the ear consciousness, the eardrum, all the nerves, the physical part. The eyeball does not cognize anything. It's not, because mind is not physical. So your eye consciousness, that part of your mind functioning through the medium of the eyeball, etc., enables you to have a cognition of what? Well, eye consciousness can only cognize 2 things: shape and color. That's its job. So you have to ask the question, well, then what part of my mind is cognizing a really well-designed cup? That's what I said in my mouth, isn't it? The eye consciousness can't cognize that. That is that's a function of your mental consciousness. And we live at the level of either sensory, and then we have all these thoughts in our mental consciousness. So as Lama says, we make the body the boss. We give so much more power to our senses than they in reality have. So what is happening? Which part of my mind is cognizing what a well-designed cup? So what happens is this. My eye consciousness goes here, and because everything I've seen and done and heard and said and thought about is programmed in my mind, and I haven't lost my memory yet, immediately, quicker than Google, and I really mean that, quicker than Google, my mental consciousness is accessed, where all my memories are, or where I've developed in this life, forget past life, or my thoughts of what I think is good and what I think is bad. And I remember it's a cup and it's this and it's that. I see this and I develop these viewpoints about what I think is good. But I don't think, oh, what a well-designed cup is a viewpoint. But that's all it is. It's a conceptual story. Everything in our mental consciousness is a conceptual story and a conceptual elaboration. Everything in our mental consciousness is a thought. Everything in our mental consciousness, including our emotions, all come down to thoughts. There are only two ways of cognizing. There's sensory consciousness, which happens to be what they call perception. And then you've got mental consciousness, which has two ways of functioning: conceptuality and then perception. And perception in this context is used to refer to a much subtler level of mind. It's beyond conceptual. Only when you've got single point of concentration, then you can have direct cognition of something. That's how they talk in Buddhist psychology. So we live at the level of this artificial way of cognizing, which is called concepts. They are thoughts made up by our minds. Everything that comes out of our mouth, everything that rages on in our mind is a conceptual story. So Buddha divides those three into three categories: the ridiculous, deluded, eye-based, fear-based, absurd conceptual stories that have no basis in reality, that are the source of our suffering and are completely demented, and we've got to get rid of them. The valid, reasonable, relatively reasonable states of mind, the virtuous states of mind. And then the third category, all the mechanics. So that's it. So therefore, we've got to start looking into our conceptual mind, into our mind, our mental consciousness, because it's full of these raging stories, and a whole bunch of them are complete maniacs, and some are valid. So we've got to sort out the facts from the fiction, the weeds from the herbs. This is the job of being a Buddhist. So everything that comes out of our mouth is an opinion. Now, that sounds shocking, because we don't think for 1 second it's an opinion. Excuse me, as far as I'm concerned, it's the truth. Objective truth. Everything we think is what we think is objective truth. He is a horrible person. I hate those people. I love those people. Oh, I like that music. We don't think it's an opinion. Everything in our mind is an opinion. Now, some opinions are valid and some are nonsense. And the delusions are the nonsense ones. So we've also got other opinions in here. We've got other viewpoints. If I'm a philosophical materialist, which is a modern person living in our culture who isn't a Christian or a Muslim, those people have a philosophy. Their minds are full of the viewpoints that their mother made them. And they're so, I mean, wherever you live, and if the worldview is Islam, then everybody else is stupid. If probably the Buddhists, unless you're not narrow-minded, if you're narrow-minded, then what you believe is right. 99% of Tibetans were Buddhists. They wouldn't have heard of materialism. They wouldn't have heard of a creator. They don't learn about that. So they know that the view of karma is the reality they know. Australian Aborigines, I can't even conceive of their view. It's so abstract. For 40,000 years, they were left alone and developed their own unusual view of the universe. It's so complex you can't even understand it. Their dream time is so unusual. Everybody on this planet has a viewpoint. That's the Buddhist approach. It's very fascinating. And Buddha's point is that some of these viewpoints, including anger, attachment, jealousy, also including the viewpoint that your mother made you. He says, no, I disagree. Your mother gave you a body. She didn't make you. He disagrees with the creator concept. He says it's a misconception. He's not being rude. So the job of being a Buddhist is to sort out fact from fiction. Why should you? Because he is talking about reality can be cognized. He's not asking you to believe his view of reality. He's not saying that. Einstein says relativity is reality. Here are my findings. Don't just believe me. Go find it for yourself. And if you prove that I'm wrong, please, I'll be the first person to hear it. Buddha talks like that. So does Jesus. The Buddha's point is don't just believe it. You work with it, and one step at a time. Because the job from here to Buddhahood is to get rid of the fictions and to be in sync with the facts. That's how Buddha talks. So our mind is our mental consciousness. We live in concepts from the grossest to the subtlest level. Some of them are stupid and ridiculous and lead us up garden paths, and some happen to be valid. And our job is to sort them out. What?
So we should have valid concepts, or is non-conceptuality something just in meditation?
No, darling, no. You start with your concepts. We live at the conceptual level now. But as we get concentration, as we get samadhi, our minds go to subtle levels beyond conceptual. That's when, on the basis of working with a conceptual level, and you understand first theoretically the theories, theoretically what is real, what is not. That's what they're doing in the monasteries, do all the debate, that's conceptual level. Then through meditation, the penny drops and you get the direct conception, you get the direct non-conceptual insight into it. It's a process.
That's another question. When you're going through your daily, so supposing you do that.
Do what?
Like the penny drops and you recognize the non-conceptual valid cognition of something. Can you go through your daily life with that, or is that just something in meditation?
Well, if it is, then that's schizophrenic, isn't it? That would be completely insane. That's like saying you sit at the piano and you realize the piece and you can play it, but in daily life you forget all about it. What a weird idea. That's demented nonsense. It's fantasizing what experiential is. That's right. Yeah. So everything that's the point is everything's in our mind is a conceptual story. Everything. That's a pretty cup. That's a nice flower. That's a flower. That's a conceptual story. It might happen to be a valid one. So this is where we have to start looking at what is reality. You have conventional reality and you have ultimate reality. All of the Buddhist path is about this. So these first in junior school, given that we're driven by these misconceptions, which is what leads us up garden paths, which is what causes us to suffer, and some of those have some of these misconceptions have this powerful emotional component, like anger and attachment, because these are conceptual stories. This is what I'm getting at. They're conceptual stories. Anger is a conceptual story. Attachment is a conceptual story. It's an assumption deep in our bones. That's the level we have to start questioning. So first we have to control the body, which is just the servant of our mind. So given that we follow attachment and follow anger and kill who we don't like and stuff in the mouth the cake that we do like and jump on whatever partner we feel like, we've got to control the body and speech, stop them following. They're the servants of our mind. So at least control the servants of our delusions and not creating ourselves more suffering. That's first level of practice. Live in discipline, live in vows, live in morality. This is a powerful way to purify your mind, to break all the habits. Which reminds me that two people have asked me if they could take refuge and take the lay vows today, this weekend. So we'll do that on Sunday. Maybe because of that, I'll talk about the meaning of vows and the power of vows and the refuge and what it means, etc. It's like entry-level junior school grade 1 practice. Then this allows us then to get to high school when we start now to get some concentration. You can do that earlier. And you start to now get into the root of the problem, which is the conceptual stories themselves. Which means seeing our mind. So we've got to start somewhere. At the grossest level, where else can you start? You can't start at a subtle level. It's absurd. So it's not only that. See, they're not the only conceptual stories. I'm going to go into why anger is a conceptual story, why attachment is a conceptual story. It sounds very shocking to say that. As far as we're concerned, it's a feeling, and it's caused by Ian. It's his fault. He did it to me. But there are other conceptual stories. That's where the big picture comes in. And everyone is allowed to have whatever story they like. It's no one else's business. So a Christian has a viewpoint, a philosophical viewpoint, that there's a being who's a creator who made the universe, made me, and runs the show. Aborigines, God knows what they think. It's the most unusual view. There's going to be so many cultures over the centuries. For me, I would never criticize any of them. My feeling is these amazing human beings over the centuries who've bothered to do what the Tibetans would say, which is to at least stop, doing anything less than eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. At least doing more than merely eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. Actually thinking about the meaning of life. How amazing. How fantastic. How dare we criticize? But we've got so much, especially materialists, have so much arrogance. How can people believe in a creator? How can people believe in reincarnation, we say? Like as if they believe the truth, they know the truth. And even that's a really fascinating view. We talk about, I believe, that relativity is real because Einstein proved it. But excuse me, have you proved it? So until you've proved it, it's belief for you. But we don't think that way, which is really evident. It's obvious. If you haven't proven for yourself relativity, it's belief until you have, and everything is the same. So lots of people have proven reincarnation, but because we don't like it, we just say, don't be ridiculous. Of course they haven't. I mean, how arrogant can you get, People say they've proven there's a creator. Well, Buddha would disagree. It's up to us. So we should relax and let people have their views. But it's up to us. The Buddha's view is by getting in sync with reality. That's his way of saying it. So would Christians say it. So would Muslims say it. I'm not complaining. Everyone's allowed to say that they're speaking the truth. Everyone's allowed to say that. Einstein's allowed to say he's right. He's allowed to. But he says, here's my methodology. Now it's over to you. I can't prove the Buddha's right yet. I haven't done it. But I'm working as my hypothesis, going one step at a time. So far, so good. I'm content with what I've found so far. That's up to me, So everything that we do that comes out the mouth is a viewpoint. What a lovely cup. She is so beautiful. I adore her. I hate him. They are viewpoints. And some of these come along with packaging called emotions. And then there are just the philosophical viewpoints. My mother made me. My father made me. My mind is the brain. My mind is not physical. Reincarnation is true. This is true. That's true. There's lots of viewpoints. We should be grown-ups. We're big girls and boys. We can handle hearing views that we don't like, but we don't. I mean, Kathy's a good point. We don't like the things we don't want. That's how attachment is. Attachment like this infant in us that can only bear the nice things, only bear the things that I think are good. So let's look at how attachment and aversion are viewpoints, because it's very shocking to us to hear this. And then if that's true, how are they not valid? Buddha's suggesting they're not valid. Let's look at it. Let's look at his reasoning. And the only way to look at this reasoning is to look at the view of karma, to look at it in the bigger picture point of view, from the Buddhist view of karma. I'm not asking you to believe a word I'm saying here. Just that I like the big picture, so I'm sorry, you got me, so you're going to have to hear the big picture. Some people you might never hear about. If you go to a Zen Buddhist place, you're not going to hear about this. Believe me. So this is the approach. I like this approach. Okay, so as I said, Buddha's saying we've got these thousands of misconceptions in our mind, hundreds of them, thousands of them. But he said they subsume to the three, and these three, when we can get them, they're very profound. That really is the basis of our practice, the basis of really developing our mind and begin to deeply understand why we suffer. So here we are. So there's the root problem, this primordial assumption, a primordial assumption of a concrete, real, definite, findable, pointable me in here. This is the root one, the root misconception, the deepest. On the basis of that, effectively, the main source of our suffering in day-to-day, the main voice of that is called attachment, which is this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction that feels I'm not enough, don't have enough, etc., which then gives rise to the next level of attachment, which is hankering, emotional hunger for something that always seems to be missing, such that when I get it, it'll fill up the gaping hole, which then exaggerates the deliciousness of the person, of Ian, of the job, of the thing, or whatever. And then the millisecond it doesn't get what it wants, because basically, essentially, as I've been saying, the way to summarize attachment is this junkie in us, this frantic, fear-based, panic-stricken little junkie that only can bear the nice things, only wants the nice things. And a brutal way of saying that is only wants what I want. It's necessarily I-based, necessarily. And then the millisecond it doesn't get what I want, which is 1,000 times a day, it's going to have a panic attack, which is called aversion. And that could be anger, as I said, all these variations of aversion, anger, annoyed, irritated, upset, you name it, all the way down to despair and depression. And so the interesting point for the Buddha is, as one Lama said, every second of the day that we're experiencing anything with our mind, it's like we're shooting a movie. Everything gets stored as memories in our mind. Everything gets stored as memories, just like that. And we've got this since beginningless time, Buddha says. Our mind goes back and back and back. As weird as this sounds to us, but this for the Buddhist view is very logical. The idea that we can be made by a creator, and I'm not being rude here, is a very weird view for the Buddha. It's not viable. You would be God. If God made you, you would be God. You can't, God, I mean, that's where, and I had this, I mean, my Jesuit priest friend, I remember discussing these things. I've got a friend. And I said, you know, the Buddhist view would be, when you become a fully enlightened being, you've got enormous qualities and power. I mean, I did a conference in Melbourne at the Catholic University years ago, and I had a 20-minute slot to talk in this conference. I remember I didn't know what to talk about until I looked up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary for the definition of God. And it said 3 essential qualities: infinite wisdom, infinite power, infinite compassion. That's the 3 qualities of a Buddha. So Buddha would agree with the Christians and the Muslims that there is that energy existing, but the Buddha's difference is we can all become one. We can all become our own one. So if there were such a being as a Buddha, who's fully developed in power, compassion, and wisdom, they can manifest their minds all over the place, doing as a flower, as this or as that. But that thing would be them. It would never be separate from them. It might look like a flower, but it couldn't be a flower. It would just be the manifestation of Buddha's mind. So the Christians have that view, but they say God created us, and then he gave us a test, and then we failed, and then we became naughty. And he said, that's true. He said, I'm going to say I misunderstood him. They have discussion. I said, that from the Buddhist perspective is not possible. If you're a perfect being with beyond delusions, infinite power, infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, and Buddha asserts that, that's Buddha, then you can manifest anything you like. You've got enormous power over the laws of the universe. But it might look like a flower, it might look like a dog, but it couldn't possibly be a flower or a dog. It just looks like. It can never be separate from. It can never become, in other words, if you're pure and perfect, you can never become impure and imperfect ever again. Not possible. He said that's an interesting discussion they have, he said. I remember something like that. I don't know if that's abstract for you, but never mind. So, what I'm getting at here. The Buddha's view is our consciousness goes back and back and back. It's a product of the law of cause and effect. And being the product of the law of cause and effect, there can't be a first cause. That's a bizarre idea for the Buddha. If you have a first cause, then that means there's something that existed that didn't have a previous cause, and that's an impossibility. So consciousness and matter, for that matter, as far as the Buddhist view is, the universe consists of matter, the 4 elements. The 4 elements, that's the model they still use. The model we used to use in the medieval days. The 4 elements, and there are minds. And they're all beginningless. So Dalai Lama in all these conversations with scientists one time, Big Bang, he said, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. By definition, there cannot be a first thing, something, an absolute first something. That implies that didn't have a cause. And if you have the law of cause and effect, which seems fairly evident, this universe runs according to the law of cause and effect, you cannot possibly have a first one. By definition, you can't. That's why Buddha disagrees with the philosophical view about a creator. He doesn't disagree with the omniscience and omnipotence and compassion. He doesn't disagree with that. That's possible. But not one being that doesn't have a cause, that's the cause of everything else. Not that view. He disagrees with that totally. He has these philosophical arguments with it, debates with it. His reality is it can't be that way. Anyway, so our consciousness goes back and back, Buddha says. And then the law that runs it, the law that runs the universe, this is Buddha's view. And he says it's a natural law. He didn't make it up. He didn't create it. He's not speculating. He's observed it. Is this law of karma. They call it that. Karma is Sanskrit. It means action. But every millisecond of what we think and do and say is an action, starting with mental action, the thought, intention, I will, and everything follows from that. And there's 1,000 of these a second, and we're not aware of them. We come into this life programmed with habits. So that's why you have to unpack and unravel and become in charge of this process. So every millisecond of what we think and do and say leaves seeds in the mind, or programs our mind. That's a very good analogy. Nothing goes astray. So those actions that are labeled negative, which is to say at the grossest level, the actions we do with our body and speech, driven by a neurosis, driven by delusions, which is an action that will harm another, that will leave seeds in our mind that will ripen in the future in four different ways, similar to that. If it's killing, then it'll ripen as a type of suffering rebirth. It'll ripen as a tendency to keep killing. It'll ripen as an experience of getting killed. And it'll ripen as an environmental type of result. There's these 4 results of karma. Type of rebirth, a tendency to keep doing it, an experience of having it done to you, and even an environmental result, even the physical world. I mean, it's all in the literature. It's all described how this can be. So virtuous action of non-killing, intentional non-killing. You see the mouse, oh no, I must not kill it. Motivated by compassion. That's a positive action. That leaves a seed in the mind that'll ripen in the future as a happy type of rebirth. It ripens as a tendency to not kill. It ripens as an experience to not get killed, and it ripens as a happy environmental result. Every action we do has any or all of these four results, and it's a natural law, and no one runs it. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's no concept of punishment and reward in Buddhism because there's no punisher and no rewarder. But we hear it like that because that's the view we have already philosophically. We have the view of punishment and reward in our bones. That's the view of ego. It's nonsense, dualistic, irrelevant, not valid, Buddha says. So, life after life after life, Buddhism, we've been programming ourselves with all these different viewpoints we have in our mind, including our good ones. I mean, aren't we fortunate? If we have any good ones at all, how amazing. We must have practiced them. How fantastic, you know? So, okay, let's look then at some of these delusions, see how they're just basic assumptions that we've had for a long, long time. And so long that we don't even think that they're assumptions. We don't think they're viewpoints. We don't think they're even a viewpoint. We certainly wouldn't think they're assumptions. We just think they're the statement of the truth. Because one of the tragic consequences of having these deluded views for so long is bad enough that when I'm angry, that my mind, I've got my angry glasses on, Ian will appear really ugly to me. And so the bad enough that, as Lama Zopa says, that he appears through the lenses of my anger as ugly, but the killer is, I will believe it's true. I believe it's true. This is the one that keeps us locked into suffering. We don't question anything we think. That's why we all have suffering and dramas and wars and divorces and crazy and suffering and misery. The nature of the delusions is they're very fixated. They're very neurotic. They're very grasping. They're very fixed and concrete. And and the more strong those delusions are, the more fundamentalist you are. This is real. This is right. I am right, you are wrong. That's the character of all the delusions from ancient habit of practicing them. So no wonder it's hard to change them. Yeah. Is that, there's your course notes. Pop them in the chair, maybe pop them on the chair. Yeah, go on.
This may sound like an odd question, but it is practice because I'm feeling.
I can't hear you quite well. Bit louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I have this ant problem in my house, and it used to be because when it's been there ever since I've lived there. I would actually enjoy just killing them and eradicating them. And then when I got into Buddhism, I was, really trying not to kill them intentionally. But sometimes it's not within the start. They get really, really.
I understand.
And what happens is my survival thing goes in because I have cats, and if they start eating all the cat food, then the cats won't eat it, and so it's like I feel like I have to choose survival, my cats or the ants. Mm-hmm. And I know this is kind of a subtle question, but I'm just wondering how you would approach something like that.
It's not subtle, it's quite a gross question. So we can look at it, but let's just keep going on this one. I'll get to these things. Okay, I'll get to these things. I'll get to it. It's a good point. Okay. But first, I want to look at, okay, now maybe, I want to bring, that's going to come, or the whole way karma works, what is a negative action, what is a positive, and the consequences, and how we take that as our basis for our practice and our life. I'll go into that. But here I want to go particularly into how these viewpoints we have in our mind are all assumptions, which is the subtler point. So, okay, so there I am, due to karma, I bump into Ian. We've got a karmic connection. Because the Buddha would say, okay, a bit more about karma then. One way our karma ripens is the type of rebirth we get. So our rebirth as a human, the Buddha would say we must have won the lottery. Unbelievable amount. It's the result of enormous virtue, of conscious, intentional, non-killing. Probably, as Lama Zopa says, practice in the context of keeping vows of morality and this is part of the answer to you actually, the keeping vows of morality in a spiritual practice. So the consequences of killing, like I said, so one would be a lower realm rebirth. We got the consequences of non-killing. We've got millions of karmic seeds in our different bank vaults, if you like. So one of our virtuous ones was triggered at the end of our past death, which gave us, we ran like a magnet to our mummy's human womb. That's the fruit of non-killing. Second, we've got tendencies. So you've just made the point. You initially had the tendency to kill, and now you've changed your view, you know. So that's the result of non-killing. But the third one, the third one is the result of non-killing is you live a long life, you don't get killed, or the result of killing is you get killed or you die young. But the fourth one, I would suggest, the fourth one is your environmental karma. Because the way the environment impacts upon us. You live in a violent place, you live in an ugly place, you live in a healthy place, you live in a beautiful place. Whatever the way the karma, whatever the way the environment is, that's part of the way we've created the causes. So you clearly, due to not killing ants, you don't get ants in your house because you killed them in the past. You know, these ants are messing up your house, is how you think of it, isn't it? So that's messing up your environment. That's one of the results of some kind of actions in the past where maybe you've harmed them. I don't know. I mean, it can't be from killing, because the result of killing environmentally is that whatever you eat doesn't nourish you, it harms you. But, you know, that's not the issue here. So if you're living, like, for example, one of the consequences of killing would be that you live in an environment where a lot of sick people and dying people, and like in a war zone, for example. That's a very specific type of environment, isn't it? So here the ants are, you know, bombarding your house, or the cockroaches or whatever the sentient beings are. That's your environmental karma of some past action. So the point about karma then here, which we'll go into later about purification, when you really, I'm answering your point now, when we really understand karma, we will know that you created the cause. They're your ants, basically. They're your ants. If you're in that war zone, you know, we have a view with a dualistic sense of who we think we are. We think, how dare all these mean people go around eating my house? How dare these ants eat my house? That's the assumption you have. That's why you get upset when they eat your house. That's why you have an assumption that they shouldn't be in your house, but they're your karmic appearance. They're your ants. You created the cause due to harming them in the past, due to eating their house in the past, messing up their environment. They're now messing up your environment. So they're your ants. So already, even there's a powerful sense of owning them now. If you live in an environment where everybody is lovely and honest and doesn't steal and keeps their cars open and their doors open and the weather is beautiful, you own that as the result of your virtue. You don't go, oh, aren't I lucky, we say. No, you're not lucky. It's the fruit of your incredible virtue of morality and goodness and non-killing and non-stealing that you get a beautiful environment and no stealing, because people trust you. When you really have the view of karma, you own what's in front of you as what you have created. So you created the cause to meet these ants. You created the cause by harming them for them to harm you. So when you even own it in a more depth like that, then you know that continuing to harm them, guess what? The consequences for you is only you get more harm. So it's not a question of, oh, can I be please given permission to make a choice between killing starving my cat or killing the ants? No, you've got to understand the law. It's a natural law. No one's running it. It's like, this is where we do understand when it comes to food. You go to your doctor and she says, honey, what's your name? Rick. You better go easy on the sugar, babe. You've got a tendency to get diabetes. So immediately she says that. There's no wiggle room. You can't go back to your doctor. Well, I'm really attached to eating sugar. Would you mind giving me permission to eat sugar and not get diabetes? It doesn't work like that, does it? You see my point? It's not the doctor's job to do that. There's no magic. It's a natural law. So when you really know it's a natural law and got nothing to do with can I, can't I, it's going to be, whatever you do will bring its own consequences. First and foremost to you. So when you begin to have this view of karma, then from your point of view, you wouldn't want to kill them. Because you don't want the consequences. 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 Forget the ants. Forget the harm you're doing to them. You don't want the consequences of being killed. Because one of the consequences of killing is to get killed, to die young, or to have the other consequences. You don't want that. Like you don't want diabetes. So you do everything in your power to stop eating sugar. Because you don't want the suffering. That's the real point about karma, which we won't just gloss over. So my feeling is this. We are very, very intelligent. And I think when we make a decision, we will do it. And because we're intelligent, we'll find methods, other methods. But we tend to think the only option is to kill. We tend to think that. It doesn't mean it's easy. But the other point is too, because everything we meet and see and taste and touch and smell is due to our own actions, when we do purification practices, you can change these things. We don't think of that. When you can purify, like for example, we'll go into that purification practice later. When you strongly regret the harm you've done to these sentient beings in the past, which is why because you don't want and that's because they're harming you. You have a strong compassion. You regret the action because you don't want the suffering. You have strong compassion for them. You purify and you vow not to do it again. Don't be surprised. Things will change. because everything is the fruit of what we do with our mind. We think it's set in stone. There are these ants, what can I do? Not like that. You're hearing it. It's just touching upon certain approaches. It makes it not just some interesting, vague theory, but genuine experiential. And there's no karma we can't change. There's no condition we can't change. There's no thing we can't purify. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. So let's look at how these are assumptions, all these assumptions we have. But essentially, especially the three poisons, the three toxic emotions. Forget the ego grasping one, the deepest assumption of all. Let's look at attachment and aversion, which are the basis of all the others we have. They're the basis of jealousy, low self-esteem, all the other dramas we have. They're the source. They're the root ones, you know. So there's my relationship with Ian. So because I have the view that I didn't ask to get born, which is what we think, that my mother made me, I'm this innocent victim, no one consulted me, that has made me and plopped me on this earth. That's how we think. I think it's an insane view. Frankly, I think it's the most demented view I've ever heard. It's horrifying. How can we be sane with that view that two maniacs can make me and just throw me out of the planet and say, here you go, now get on with your life? I mean, how dare Hitler's mother make Hitler? How dare? I mean, that's the logic we're saying. She made Hitler. I mean, what a brutal thing to do. What a hideous thing to do. How dare you? We don't think of it like that, do we? Do you understand my point? I find it hilarious, the idea of a creator. I'm not being rude about people who have faith in a creator. Okay. So here I am, this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, whose fault it is not. Or if you like, for whom good things and bad things happen, they're good luck and bad luck. I have no say in it, just bad things happen, good things happen, no one knows why. We have these views. This is what we think, it's true. I just find that nihilism. So then I'm in this relationship, believing that the boy will make me happy, find Ian, dump all my needs onto him. Okay, I've got love and compassion as well, I'm a nice person too. But all these assumptions deep in my bones, and that assumption is called attachment. And the more hungry I am internally, which means the more miserable I am, the more I'm going to dump all my needs on top of Ian. We know this. So I think it's right. I don't think I have a viewpoint. No, I do even think I have a viewpoint that I love Ian, and it's Ian's job to make me happy. We do think that's a real thing. We really do believe that's his job, to make me happy. That means he has to do whatever I want every second, doesn't it? And then when he doesn't, I get angry. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. So one way of saying it is attachment is an assumption that I only deserve the good things, and aversion is an assumption that I do not deserve the bad things. Think about that. Can we recognize that? You understand? It's very fascinating. So we've got to analyze, where do those assumptions come from? Unpack these assumptions, please. Let's analyze these assumptions. So saying I deserve happiness implies he is responsible, doesn't it? It implies that. When you say I deserve it, it means someone should give it to you. Doesn't it mean that? Can you see my point? That's why I use the example. If you look in your bank and you don't say, how dare there be no dollars in my bank? I deserve dollars. You get my point? You would not say that because you know it's your bank account. So when it's your bank account, you would never say, I deserve dollars. You're speaking to yourself. Well, if I deserve dollars, I better earn them. It's a very powerful idea. If you don't look in your garden, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. It's a very weird idea because we know it's my garden. Well, this is the point the Buddha's making, that my life is my garden. It's my making. I created the cause to meet Ian. I created the cause for every single bad thing that happened. I create the cause for every good thing that happens to me. So in this sense, the deserve is a heavy-duty view. Deserve, they don't really use it in Buddhism. But if you think of deserve, whatever we get, we do deserve, because it's my garden and my bank account, and this is my life and it's my garden. So of course, whatever I get, I deserve. Although it's heavy duty to say it that way. It's simply the result of my past causes, my past actions. No one deserves to get diabetes, but if you eat too much sugar, you'll get diabetes. Of course, you deserve it, but we say deserve is very heavy and punitive. Do you understand my point? So don't think of it that way. But that's what we assume. We assume I don't deserve bad things, and I do deserve good. So if it's true you deserve them, you have to create the causes to get them. That means it's your doing. That's the Buddha's view. So when you have the view of karma, you don't be like that. So these Tibetan nuns I'm about to talk about before, I mentioned, who were invited by Richard Gere, they were talking about their suffering, abused and raped, sexually abused and raped. Raped and tortured for a couple of years in prison in Tibet, talking about their suffering. And the thing was, the interesting point was, it was very evident to the Americans, the 20 Americans, the whole cross-section of Americans were invited. They weren't angry. And this we don't trust in our culture. We think if you don't have anger, you're just passive, you're being walked over, and that anger is a good response to something. Because we have the view that when the bad things happen, we don't deserve them. So, of course, we're allowed to be angry. That's the way we live our lives. We live our lives that way, don't we? How dare these bad things happen to me? So those young women raped and tortured, but didn't have anger. That's too weird for our lives. That's too strange for our minds. But they have the view of karma. That's not just some interesting view they learned in the school. It's in their bones. It's their view of reality. So, of course, you would never have the thought, how dare they do this to us? We don't deserve it. It wouldn't arise in their minds. Can you hear my point? As shocking as this is to us. Can you hear the point? There wouldn't be anger in their mind. There wasn't anger in their mind. This is hard for us to hear. But this is the Buddhist approach. We've got to unpack these assumptions, look into our thoughts, and go ever more deep, ever more deep, ever more deep, realizing they're all conceptual stories and they're all a series of assumptions. So we've got to unpack them and see if they're valid. That's the point. It's a practical issue, not moralistic. So when you have, I can see myself, I'm not saying I'm not a saint, I'm not a saint, but I take this stuff seriously. I try to put my money where my mouth is. And because I have to teach it, I've got to try to be authentic. I'd be schizophrenic if I weren't, isn't it? So for me, one of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism, for me, the piece that was missing in my life was the one of karma. I find that's hugely powerful, that view, that I'm the fruit of my own past. That's so empowering as far as I'm concerned. It is empowering. You know you're the fruit of your own past. If you practice piano for 20 years, you know you created the musician that you are. You did it. It's not good luck. It's not bad luck. No one else did it to you. You can't blame Steinway for making you a good musician. You can't blame Bach for making you a good musician. You needed Steinway's piano, Bach's music, and a good teacher, but you are happy to own responsibility that you practiced that for 20 years. You made the musician. That's the view of karma. Anger, love, jealous, whatever happens, we are the boss. I find that such a powerful concept. So liberating, so empowering. The opposite to victim. So when you really internalize it, it lessens this hubris, this child who thinks I only deserve the good. It's like an infant. We know some people are like this. Forget yourself. We can see their behavior is outrageous. We think, who the hell do they think they are? This what's the word we use? This entitlement. Who the hell do they think they are? They deserve good things only. Excuse me. Do you understand my point? But that's how ego is. And how dare bad things happen to me. It's heavy duty to hear it, but it's powerful. They're assumptions. We've practiced them for a long time, Buddha says. And then you're ridiculous. Rip them out. So we have to have courage. Courage, I tell you. So this view is based on karma. So with a relationship with Ian, how do I do the inner work? Well, there's different ways. One way is using the view of karma. Let's say yet again he cheats on me, Or let's say he does cheat on me. So the usual victim view, and I'm not criticizing, that's where you suffer terribly as the victim because you feel you have no power. That's what victim means. Then I feel how unfair, it's so brutal, how dare he? He said he'd love me, he said he'd take care of me, look at him cheating on me. And so, of course, I don't know. This is the point. This is the tragedy of the victim. Not only do I realize I could actually leave him. We don't realize that. That's why people kill each other in relationships, because you run back like a moth to a flame as a victim, demanding he change, demanding he stop doing this thing. You should make me happy. When it's evident the man is fed up with me, but I can't see the reality. There's pain, there's hurt, there's resentment, there's jealousy, there's hopelessness. not only can I not see I could change my mind about it, which is really tough, I can't even see I can change my relationship. Just get the hell out. Goodbye. I'm leaving you, babe. Bye. Can't even see that, because they're the only two options when it finally comes to it. Whether it's your lousy job, your lousy your relationship with your mother, the boyfriend. We're so overwhelmed by our own hopelessness. We're so full of attachment and aversion and jealousy and resentment and not fair, poor me. We can't make any wise decisions. We don't even see we've got the power to make decisions. We just go back like a moth to a flame. Look at people working jobs that they hate. For years, it's been their lives hating work. Every day going to work, hating it. Really never once thinking maybe you could leave. You say, you could leave the job. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. Oh, no, I couldn't get another job. Oh, no, insecure. I couldn't do that. This, that. No money, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can change your mind. We can't even hear that option. We're not imprisoned. This we can see. This is not being mean, but look at when you have these people who are abused in abusive relationships. You might as well be locked into the house because you can't even see the possibility that you could change or that you could leave. So this is the suffering of these states of mind. They make us paralyzed. That man who's abusing you might as well have you locked in. That's the suffering of these delusions. That's the suffering of these attachment and aversion and jealousy and all the rest. The intensity of the suffering of them. We are paralyzed by them. This is what Buddha calls suffering. This is what he means by suffering. We blame the person. I didn't have a choice. Oh, I couldn't leave my job. Oh, no, I couldn't leave my husband. No way could I leave my husband. No, my parents wouldn't approve. The society doesn't approve. I'd be seen as a bad person. Oh, no, he really does. Oh, he really does love me after all. Punch. No, he really does love me after all. We live in fantasy lands. And that's what ego does, is find reasons to bolster our absurd position. So the victim mentality is hopeless, can't see myself, completely blaming him, putting all my responsibility onto him to make me happy, angry, resentful, jealous, fearful. I mean, this is not criticizing us. This is what Buddha means by suffering. This is like hell on earth. This is the meaning of suffering, our own states of mind. Totally paralyzed. So then you start to see, maybe I'll go and see my own mind now. I've heard Buddha says you can change your mind. Wow. So now you start to become less of a victim. And now I start to notice and control my speech maybe. And at some point, I keep thinking he's cheating on me. At some point, I've got to make some decisions. When you've got attachment, you can never make a decision. You just keep running back like a moth to a flame, like I said. But now if you've got less victim, I've got to make some decisions here. I've got to see reality here. So maybe I can ask him to stop cheating. And if he says, yeah, I'll stop cheating, Robina, cool, we're fine. We'll be okay. Good. Keep moving. But what if he doesn't? Then I've got to make some choices. And there are two options. This is so brutal, I can't tell you. We have two options. One is go. Sorry, babe, I can't handle this. Goodbye, Ian. I'm out of here. That takes enormous courage. It looks like easy. It is not. Usually we leave relationships out of rage and anger. This is not the valid reason to leave a relationship. The valid reason to leave is because you can't handle it. It's your karmic appearance and Ian cheats on you, babe. When you have the view of karma, this is a powerful argument. This is a really powerful argument like those young women. Those young women, in the end, one of them said, after telling their story about being raped and sexually abused and tortured. And of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we realized we must have harmed them in the past, and because they will suffer in the future because of their actions. That's coming from the view of karma. You cannot have that compassion until you have karma, which is junior school. Until you've got compassion for yourself and know your relationship with these ants, you cannot ever have compassion, even for the ants. So then I can realize I can't handle this. And maybe I check up and the relationship's over. Part of our trouble is we really believe it's a sin to leave a relationship. In Buddhism, that's ridiculous. If it's over, it's over. You can't force it. If it's over, it's over. Goodbye, out of here. But that takes courage, because we're scared of what people think. We're scared of what he thinks, or we might get upset. Or I don't want to upset the children. I don't want to upset my family. I mean, that's the kind of one of the ways we are for the. Some people, like I said before about Kathy, are patient are kind people. But a downside for patient, kind people, they don't like upsetting the apple cart. Are you like that, Kathy? Or not? I'm just asking. It's curious. We're all different. We're all different. But I mean, you know, like in my family, it was like a joke sometimes. My sisters and I would talk about it. And one of my sisters, you know, she would always try to make everything nice. She couldn't stand suffering and fighting and yelling. So she'd do everything in her power to make sure everybody behaved nicely and get daddy out of the way of Robina and this. But I just didn't care. And if violence came, I'd jump into the middle, you know. I was like, I can almost increase the violence. I mean, do you understand my point? So the good girls look so kind, but you can't, because your attachment can't stand the problems. You're going to manipulate like crazy to make it all nice, looking like such a nice girl. That's, you know, so a nice girl will go, oh no, I couldn't leave Ian. He really does love me. Oh no, I couldn't leave. The children might be upset. Oh, I couldn't leave. The society would criticize me. Oh, I could. It's all worried about. It's sort of about yourself, really. Or if you decide there's something worthwhile in the relationship, you've got to decide. You've got to decide. Maybe there's some advantage. Then your option is one. Change your mind. Reassess the situation. Try to see something good in it. And this is insane to us because aversion just paints the whole of the Ian as a monster. So you think, how could I see anything good? There's nothing good. That's absurd. And the same with your job. The job mightn't be your fanciest job on the planet. It might be a crummy job. Your boss might be mean. But if it really is at this point you can't get a better job, that's a perfectly fine decision. Then you be courageous and adult and decide to see the good things in the job and to start to be happy. But we are victims, and victims think it's all everybody else's fault. And we run back like a moth to a flame, continually happy to be a victim so we can keep complaining. I know it doesn't sound like we do that, but that's what we do. We're hopeless. There's no responsibility. With guilt and all this stuff, there's no responsibility. There's no accountability. So this is correct. This is what practice is. Putting in ordinary worldly terms, you know, giving up attachment, giving up aversion, becoming more accountable, more courageous, knowing I either change the situation. If I can't, I change my mind. And that's why my friends in prison are such powerful examples. They don't have the luxury of getting out of prison. So they've got no choice but to change their interpretation of prison. So the people I know who are really practicing, living in these hellholes, seen as like animals, they are happy human beings. My friend Mitch in Kentucky in death row. I'm ready for that electric jolt, Robina. He's content. Been there 30 years, done all his appeals. He's an amazing practitioner, you know, takes care of all the people on death row. He's content. He's content. Living in this hellholes. He's content because he has no choice. He's faced the garbage. Then we're no longer like, you know, being pulled from pillar to post like a puppet. Then we have control over our lives because we can change our mind. This is the essence of it. We can learn to be happy regardless of the external situation. It's logical when we think about it, but it's the hardest job we'll ever do. But that's the job that Buddha says we can do. That's Buddha's expertise. We can see that he doesn't really own this. Lots of people talk this way. You can talk many things about Christianity, similar. So Buddha doesn't own this stuff. He's got no copyright on it. He's not a creator of this. He just has bought into this stuff and really knows it deeply and well and has excellent techniques for accomplishing it. That's what I'd say, you know. And we're not even discussing compassion yet. We're discussing becoming our own self, becoming more powerful, more empowered, more joyful, more content, more in charge of our lives, less fearful, less victim. Then we're qualified to help others because we're all in the same boat. So attachment and aversion, these two main delusions in our daily life that are the source of all the others, are basically viewpoints that we believe in 1,000,000,000%, that have this massive emotional component. They're so ingrained, you know. So it takes time to unpack. It takes time to, you know, layer by layer by layer going against. And the only, you know, first control your body and speech, then actually have the courage to check our assumptions, to check them, to look ever more deeply at these things, you know. And that's our choice. That's up to us. And we happen to be talking Buddha's views here. That's our decision, what we use. We're the boss. Are we communicating? Any questions? Yes.
My question is just about supplication.
Supplication.
So, yes.
What do you mean, darling?
You have this. You have this experience, and you know you can't handle it. So you say your mantras. You say your prayers to Padmasambhava. You say, "Could you remove these obscurations?
I see.
Could you help me to deal with these?"
Mhm.
But it sounds like that is just. But you believe in bodhisattvas. You believe that that power is out there, but it's not your own power.
It's all right, darling. Listen, I know, Kathy, we speak about it very simply. If you're sick, you've got a headache, and you've heard of a really good, doctor down the road, you'd go to that doctor and you'd supplicate, wouldn't you? You'd say, please, would you give me medicine? I've got a headache. Would you please help me? Would you say that?
Yeah.
Would you do that? And that's reasonable, isn't it? Well, why would it be not reasonable doing that to Padmasambhava? Same. Identical, darling.
So this would be
Identical.
This would be good karma because.
Don't worry, keep it simple. Just don't use all these Buddhist words. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, Kathy. You're criticizing that as if somehow a cop-out. But would you think it's a cop-out to go to a doctor to give you a pill? No one complains about that. How fortunate you are to find a doctor who's got a pill. Well, how fortunate you are you've got someone whom you have confidence in who can help you. The Buddha's that. There's no difference. Can you not see that, Kathy? You look puzzled.
So you are saying that these bodhisattvas do exist for your benefit.
Okay.
But you're part of those bodhisattvas.
Well, don't make it complicated, Kathy. If you haven't gone all the way to being a bodhisattva yourself, you're not part of them. What are you talking about, part of them? You can become a doctor just like that doctor, and you can become a bodhisattva just like those bodhisattvas. But they're there, and they've done their job, and their job is to help you. That's why they become bodhisattvas. They become Buddhas. They're dying to help. You just have to be asked once, and they'll help you. It's their job. What's wrong with that? Can you hear my point?
Yes.
But we make it all kind of religious and holy and blah, blah, blah,
I just compare it to praying to Catholic.
Nothing wrong. Absolutely the same. There's not a fraction of difference.
I always found it wrong.
Why? Why? What's wrong with asking someone to help? What's wrong with praying to Saint Teresa and asking her to help you? What's wrong with praying to Our Lady and asking her to help you? Excuse me? What's wrong with that? Could you please tell me any logical reason why that's wrong? Huh? Kathy?
It just shows a frailty on.
Oh, I see. So it's frail because you go to a doctor. We are so schizophrenic. I mean, you're chucking out stuff you don't have to chuck out. But why? For me, it's equal. If there's a person who's in a human body who has medical knowledge, their job is to help you. If there's a person who maybe isn't in a human body, and that's where you got to take the Buddhist teachings as and know how the beings can exist without a human body. That's a possibility, and that's the Catholic view too. The saints and people don't have a human body, but you can also have a human body. But there's consciousnesses there who are bodhisattvas, who are Buddhas, who are embodied somewhere. It's the same principle. Their job is to help. So why would you think it's inferior to ask someone to help you? How arrogant of you.
I think what it is that it's the whole idea of karma. If this is what you have produced because of your karma, to ask for help to get rid of such karma seems like.
Huh?
But
it's the karma you have to have a headache. Due to part of negative action, you get a headache. You own it. You accept that you did it. You also do your practice, and then you can kind of get a pill. What's wrong with that? Please, excuse me. We're so punitive. You're so heavy against yourself. It's shocking.
So that is what you are going to teach, the fact that you regret having done things.
That's the purification practice.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion here.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's part of that.
Not the same.
No, it's not. That's okay. No, it is okay. What I'm trying to get at is, when I was a Catholic, the big difference in Buddhism and Christianity is clearly that God's the creator. That's the difference. That's the main difference. But the rest of it, asking someone to help you, what's wrong with that? The Catholics have all the saints and Our Lady and this one and that one. What's wrong with asking him to help you? If you think that you go to the doctor and the doctor magically makes you better, that's misconception. You got to do the work. That you rely upon the doctor and you take the medicine. So that's the difference here. Let's discuss now the four opponent powers, the purification practice, and that'll show the difference. Okay. So the first step in purification is you acknowledge that you did some dumb things. I'm using the analogy of eating poison. They all say that one. So like you've acknowledged you've eaten the sugar. You've got to say, oh, what a dummy. I can't believe I eaten the sugar. Quick, What can I do to fix it if I've got an allergy, let's say? The first step is you have to acknowledge you did something that will harm you. And this is the point that I said to you. What's your name again? Rick, about the ants. We've got to first recognize this concept of karma, that everything we think and do and say will bring consequences to us first. This is what takes so much time for us to hear. It's not what we naturally think. It really does take brutal kind of thinking through this and applying it. So the first step is you have to acknowledge you lied, killed, badmouthed, cheated on your boyfriend, whatever, which is the analogy of eating the poison. You get my point? You poison your own mind. So the first one, regret, is like regretting because you don't want the suffering results. It's compassion for you. Can you hear that? Why, imagine if you've just eaten the poison and then you just get guilty. Oh, I'm a bad person. I ate too much poison. Oh, every day you're getting sicker and sicker. I'm such a bad person. I ate poison. What a stupid idea. The second you recognize you've eaten poison, whom can I turn to? Quick, where's the doctor? You'll immediately do something about it. The same here. Because the Buddha is saying every millisecond of what we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind. It's a very dynamic, powerful process. We're so not used to this thinking. Because we think I'm going to get punished. That's why we think, oh, if no one saw me do it, I get away with it. That's like saying, oh, my doctor doesn't see me eat sugar, I won't get diabetes. That's ridiculous. Do you understand my point? So the first step is to acknowledge and to regret having done and said those things because you don't want the future suffering. You've got to really think about that one, Kathy, that everything we think and do and say programs us and brings results to us. We are the boss. Just like if you've eaten poison, you don't want to get sick. So it's a very healthy attitude to acknowledge it and regret it, isn't it? You get that point? First one. Now, this is where the second one is different from the Christian one. If I've committed a sin, which is doing what God said I shouldn't do, my next step is, and the next step for the Buddhist, you rely upon the doctor, and the doctor's the Buddha. So here, if I'm a Catholic, I would have to confess to God, wouldn't I? Because God is the creator. God has said not to do it. I went against his will, so I must confess to God. And now what do? I have to beg God to forgive me. Is that correct? Isn't it? Why? Because forgiveness is what purifies me. You with me? Forgiveness is what purifies, but not for the Buddha. He's a really nice guy. He would forgive you, but it's not what makes it. The doctor doesn't. You don't go to your doctor, oh, I ate too much sugar again. Please forgive me. That's not the point. You got to stop eating sugar. So you rely upon the doctor, but you have to take the medicine. So the Catholic one is you rely upon God, and doing God's will and having him forgive you is the purification. So it's a massive difference there. You get my point of it? So, but you can also, if you're a Catholic, you pray to Our Lady and the saints. I loved Our Lady. I love the saints. I was in love with the saints. They're not God. So the Buddha relationship is a bit like with them. They're friends and support, and they're powerful beings who do exist, whom you can rely upon and have confidence in and think about. We're human beings. We need something to uplift us, But cynical materialists say you're just pathetic, you're ridiculous, believing in la-la lands. But everybody relies upon somebody. If you're a materialist, you get depressed, you rely upon your friend to help you. What's the difference? So you can't see some and you can see others. It's the same attitude, and we're all human. We all need someone to turn to support us and love us. Do you understand, Kathy? A little bit. We're communicating. Are we communicating?
I think so.
Good, darling. So the second step after regret, and you regret what you've done in this life, you regret anything you've done in the past, you say, I regret whatever I've done with my body and speech to harm sentient beings, because I don't want those karmic seeds to ripen as my suffering. And you've got to really say that because we're not used to thinking this way. We just think I'm a bad person. I'll get punished. That's very deep in our bones. That's not the Buddha's view at all. We're the boss here. So whom do you rely upon? The doctor. Buddha's our doctor. Buddha's like the doctor. It's a good analogy. He's got the methods that I have decided I want to use. I go to the doctor whom I've checked up on, whose methods I appreciate. They're not forcing me. It's my choice. I choose the doctor. I choose the Buddha, and I want to practice his method. So I rely upon the Buddha. Do you understand, Kathy? But I do the work. I do the work. I've got to get up the sugar, and I've got to apply the antidotes. I've got to do it. That's the difference. So the second part of the second step, reliance, is where you now have compassion for those you've harmed. So you regret for their sake as well. Because you know that, no one wants suffering. And if you're brave enough, you also have compassion for those who've harmed you. That's up to where we're at, like we talked last night. The third step is you apply the antidote. You take the medicine. So here, there can be, in Buddhism, there's a whole medicine cabinet of medicines. So it's a very natural process. If I'm regretting having killed, then I apply the antidote in my daily life, which is to help people, to help people. If I'm regretting lying, I try to tell the truth. If I'm regretting stealing, I try to give. You just apply the antidote. You do the opposite. It's very straightforward. But there's particular practices in Tibetan Buddhism, certainly, as you know, that you visualize the Buddha above your head and you visualize. And these are very wonderful meditations. I will do one. I keep promising to do them, but I haven't done, but I will do. They're very uplifting, visualizing the Buddha above your head, nectar coming, filling you completely, totally purifying while you say a mantra. And it's all just your mind doing it. It's your mind visualizing. It's your mind seeing nectar coming. It's your mind reciting a mantra. It's your mind purifying your own mind. You do the work. And the fourth step, you vow not to do again. You resolve, you change. It's a very practical process. You acknowledge the dumb things you've done. You rely upon the doctor, you apply the antidote, and then you vow to change. It's practical. It's practical. It's reasonable. It's basic psychology. Really simply putting it, this practice. With me, people? It's all the mind. As Lama Yeshe says, purification is the power of your own mind regretting, having compassion, applying the antidote, resolving to change. It's your mind, nothing else. Your mind creates, you create negativity with your mind. You purify it by creating positivity with your mind. The mind, you are the one who does it. We are the ones who change. So we're using, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting your name. Rick and his ants. This sounds pretty cosmic, but people tell me it really works. So there are these ants. As Lama Yeshe puts it, everything that we experience, whoever we see, whatever they do to us, it's our karmic appearance. It's kind of a powerful concept. Whatever we see in this life, whatever happens to us is the fruit of our past actions. There's nothing that we see, taste, touch, smell, have, experience, think, do that isn't the fruit of our past karma. We are like the bosses of this process. The more we understand that, the more when we see those ants eating our house, straight away we see our karmic appearance. Well, hi ants, welcome it back. What about, they're eating my house, I must have eaten your house. So you're going to change it. You can change that karma. So first you regret it. You regret whatever I must have done in the past to harm these ants, to cause them to be harming me right now. Because, like I said before, there are 4 ways that karma ripens. One is, and these 4 steps, these 4 parts of the process of purification, purify specifically each of these 4. So one way our karma ripens, it's called the experiences similar to the cause, which is how we're seen and treated by others. And if you think about your life since you're born, you've bumped into bunches of sentient beings, right? And they've either harmed you or they've helped you. Basically, that's it. Everyone is your karmic appearance. Whatever people have done to you, said to you, how they've treated you is the fruit of your actions like that. It's called experiences similar to the cause. So a person's kind to you, that's the fruit of your kindness. And karma's pretty personal. You can't bump into, you're just not a random thing. The karma such a thing as a random event in Buddhism, according to karma. It's a very bizarre idea, But it's very shocking for us because we assume everything's random. If we're Christian, we know God's got a plan. We don't know the plan, so we know there is some plan. At least you've got some faith in somebody with a plan. But if you're a materialist, there's no plan. It should scare the life out of us. It does scare the life out of us. No one knows why anything happens. It's all just random. It's all good luck and bad luck. That's beyond superstition. The Buddha karma is a natural law. He didn't make it up. He doesn't run it. No one runs it. It's like the way things are. It's like botany is a natural law that gardens run within. Gardens are governed by the law of botany. It's just the way the world is. That's how Buddha talks about karma, just the way the world is. So, this first one, then, by acknowledging and regretting whatever I must have done to harm these ants, which is the result of which is them harming me, then by regretting from the depths of your heart whatever harm you did to those ants in the past lives, because you know you don't want this suffering, you know it's right in front of you, then that's the first step. And that will help change the very thing called the experience similar to the cause. Then second, you have compassion for them. Strong compassion for these ants, these creatures, sentient beings just like you, want to be happy, blah, blah. Third, you purify the karma by doing the mantras, by saying, doing the different practice, you purify the causes. Fourth, you vow never to harm again. Don't be surprised, those ants will go, babe. And I'm not joking. Really, I'm serious, Rick. I mean, if karma has any meaning at all, if it's true, if it's valid, then whatever you think and do is you create new karma. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Following that, whenever I think about this, I think, but I'm going to do the purification.
Just, I want the question.
Okay.
Give me a question,
If
Rosia.
the purification is done, and you say it works immediately.
I did not say that, Rosia. Don't put words in my mouth.
Okay. If it works, and it changes the situation.
But it takes time sometimes.
The way
What's the question, darling? What's the question,
we have
Rosia?
created so much of the same karma.
Rosia, I want to know if you can express it as a question, it'll really help you. Can you get a question from all this? What's your question? It's helpful. You'll find it very helpful.
Although
No, I want a question. You got to think about it and get a question. You want to state your preamble first. That's your own thinking. Do your thinking and then get your question. When you're ready, ask me your question. Who else? This really helps, I promise you. Because it's all this thinking, you're trying to get it out there, but it's too many thoughts because you haven't got down to your question yet. Any questions? No questions. Yes, darling, go.
Is it as effective?
Start again, darling. What?
Is it as effective? Isn't I'm not always doing this like right at night, but I try to do it right after something
I understand.
happens.
That's right.
But I don't necessarily have time to do a set amount.
Well, sorry, excuse me. You don't decide to have time. Don't blame the time, like as if it's not your fault. I don't have the time. You don't choose to have the time. Be in charge, sweetie pie. It's a very important point, Felicity.
But doing one
Sweetheart, just think about the meaning of it.
right away.
No, listen. You've got a big tree there, it's a gigantic tree, and the job is to cut it down. Well, every now and again I pass the tree, I go a little bit. I pass the tree, I go a little bit. Take a while, won't it? So the more strongly you engage your mind in it, as Lama Zopa says, says, the more powerfully your mind engages in these 4 steps, is the more powerfully going to be knocking down the tree.
Mhm.
So think about it. It's logical. It's not superstitious. It's logical. Do you understand?
Okay.
It's up to you. Yeah. What else, people?
Here's a question.
Yes, sweetheart. What's your name?
Bernie.
Bernie. Hi, Bernie. Come on.
Hello. It would be kind of difficult to feel regret for a past action if you don't know.
No, it seems
If you
reasonable.
okay.
I know.
If you're feeling misfortune today
Yes.
and you don't have absolutely no idea
Yes.
what was the cause,
I
it's kind
understand.
of hard to feel regret.
I know.
For what you don't know.
But I'm
the
not
cause.
sure. I'm not sure that's true. Let me just give an example. In the 1960s, actually when I was 13 in the 1950s, I decided I'd smoke cigarettes because I was in love with Jimmy Dean and I wanted to look like Jimmy Dean. So I used to steal my mother's Garrick cigarettes. I think it's English. And I'd look in the mirror and try and be like Jimmy Dean. I have a cigarette. He'd sit there because I was in love with Jimmy Dean. I was 11, I think, or 12. So I'd try to look like Jimmy Dean with my cigarette. Anyway, whoops. So anyway, eventually I started to smoke cigarettes. So then when in the 1970s, when I decided to give up cigarettes, I wanted to do martial arts. I mean, when I was 15 and 13, I didn't know about cigarettes causing struggles for your lungs. I did not know it. So when I was in 1974 and I decided I'd been smoking cigarettes. I decided I was going to do martial arts. So I started. Well, I nearly died. I couldn't breathe. So I mightn't have remembered. So someone would have told me that smoking does that. And I didn't know at the time. And I certainly wouldn't know which cigarette when. But in general, if you look at the result, if you have the system that you can explain, and karma explains what causes what, then even though you don't remember having done it, but you can deduce you must have done it because now you're experiencing the results. If you see a garden full of weeds, you didn't know they were weeds when you planted them, but now you see the result. So in that sense, you have to regret what I didn't know at the time, but what a dummy. Look what I've caused for myself. So you don't, or let's say you get, I always think of if you eat too many chocolates, you come out in yucky stuff on your skin. You don't have to remember which M&M on which day. You just get the learning from it. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because if karma is a natural law, Bernie, if karma is a natural law, then you'll deduce what the cause was because you can see the result. So in other words, if someone keeps not believing your words right now, even though you're telling the truth, you can deduce you've lied in the past.
Okay. So
Do you see my point?
Sure.
It's an interesting point. We've got to have confidence in this system. Otherwise, it just seems like superstition otherwise. So the real point is when you see the results, you regret. I mean, you regret what you've done. You didn't know in the past. You're causing yourself suffering. Now look at the result. I'm a dummy. I regret it. What a dummy, because I don't want future suffering. Then you learn from it and try not to do it again. Does it make sense a bit, Bernie?
Sure, you're saying the result needs to be similar to your cause.
That's exactly right. Exactly. That's the way they say in karma. So it gets more intricate than that, but the principles are pretty clear, you know. Yeah, exactly. But this, so we can start again. You got your tea ready. Let's go. Time is it? 3:30. Okay. So drink your tea. Then we'll have, once you finish your tea, we can do a little meditation. I'll talk about different kinds of meditation. So do you have any questions so far? Because basically what we've talked about is the mind and karma, and they both come together because the mind is, you know, what the mind does and how it works is within this law of karma, this natural law. So we'll just talk very briefly about both of these. So are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you first listen to the question for me?
Go on.
So, one sentence to just say, so there's no free will, but, so there's no free will. I have this karma, and I'm trying to purify or change it. Is it that I'm trying to change it, or I'm just saying it's all there, these are the things that I need to do as an antidote to purify what's already there, because I can't change it?
So I want to know, first, I have to analyze this first phrase. You stated there is no free will. Well, can we please discuss this free will? Because I find it very bizarre that we talk about it as some scientific truth, when I'm not being rude here, but its source is coming from Christianity. So why do you assume there's a reality called free will? We've got to analyze what the Christians say about it. What do you think it means? What's it mean? What's it mean?
That I have the power to impact my life. Or
But who says that? But why the word free? It's a really important question here. Why the word free? Free meaning what?
I have the choice.
But free meaning what? Sorry, free meaning.
There's nobody in charge of it.
That does not mean it. God, absolutely, that is not true. Jesus Christ said that God gave us this thing called free will. I want to know what that means because I don't buy into that at all. Well, then don't. No, but by saying there isn't free will, you're implying there is a thing, but Buddha said you don't have it. I'm suggesting it's a meaningless concept for a start. So please tell me what you think it means in your language.
I think there's none.
But I'm not just, you're assuming there's a thing called free will. Let's not use that phrase. So why don't you say in your words what you mean? Don't use that phrase. What are you, by hearing about karma, what are you assuming it means?
What I assume free will means or karma means.
We are saying here there's a concept coming from Christianity called free will. I'm not buying into that. I can't because it's a different view. So we don't use that phrase, but everybody uses it like it's real. So what do you mean without using that phrase? And I'm hearing you suggesting because there's karma, there's no ability to. So say in your words what you think it means, what karma is implying.
So when I do purification practice.
No. I need you to first tell me what you mean. Without using the term free will, tell me what you think it means.
That I have the ability to decide what I do and what I don't do.
But you just said there isn't that ability.
I know.
So what are you talking about? What do you mean? Well, why don't you ask a question? Ask me a question, please.
So the question is, when I'm purifying.
No, about this before you go there, darling. You've got to get clear. We haven't yet come to proper communication about this phrase. What do you mean by it when you say it?
I mean, I have the ability to change or not change my life.
But you just said before that you accepted there isn't that ability.
Right.
So what do you mean?
I see your point.
Yeah, thank you. So please tell me what you think is true. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but this is a common question. 100,000 times a day people ask this question. All over the world. That's exaggerating, clearly. But we all have that question because as soon as we hear about karma, we assume it means we have no choice. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
No.
Okay, so what are you saying?
So what I'm saying is, I have no choice. So when I'm pure.
So then you're just saying it. You just said it right there. You think we don't have a choice. What do you mean by that? That is a bizarre. Your own life will tell you that's not true. 1,000 times a day you make choices. So what on earth are you talking about? You don't have a choice. It's a meaningless statement. Do you make choices every day?
Yes.
Okay, so the real point is to understand the evolution of those choices. What is involved in making choices?
Yes.
So making choices is a dependent arising. Free will implies that nothing. Free will is a bit like this. We've all got equally the ability to make money. So when really fundamentalists mean people say, oh, look at these homeless people. They could get a job anytime they like. They've got free will. That's how we think about it. Meaning there's no conditions that determine the choices you make. So the Buddha would say, of course we have the ability to choose, but it's contingent. It's a dependent arising. So your ability to choose to play music, what's one of the main causes for that?
That I've done it in the past.
And not even in karmic terms. You've got a tendency to play music. So the person who has no tendency to play music, they don't have the choice to play music, do they? I mean, think about it. If you don't have a garden, you have no choice to make a garden. You don't have a garden. So it's a contingent thing. So if you can't access your tendency to not kill because you've got such a habit to kill, you effectively can say you're stuck. You can't choose not to kill. You don't even know what it means. So it's contingent, but it's not set in stone. We've all got the potential at some point, but you've got to look at your present conditions, and they will tell you what choices you can make. So we all got the choice, but choice, like everything, is contingent. It's a dependent arising. Are we communicating a bit?
Yes.
So now your question was purification.
Okay. So the real question is, so based on the fact that it's dependent arising, so the conditions are there. I've been born with these conditions, so I think Bernie was alluding to that. So the karma is gonna come. So am I purifying specific individual karmic actions or seeds? Or do I just look at these are the karma, these are the antidotes? If I'm having a headache, that means, or if somebody's lying to me, that means I've lied to them in the past. So do I generally just purify? I've lied in the past. I'm taking the vow not to lie anymore, or do I say I've lied to Robina yesterday and all the other lies that I've told? So do I need to specify what I'm purifying, or do I just?
I understand. Well, you can't though, can you? But this is like we were saying before. You can't, because you can't remember everything you've done. But we can see from but we know, you must have lied in the past. So you think of the time you've lied today, and you think, I regret doing that. Because you know why, Debbie? Because you're talking to yourself. I don't want to keep lying. I don't want this consequence of lying. I don't want to get lied to. I know I don't want the suffering. And then you can go, and you know what? I must have lied countless times in the past. All these millions of seeds into my mind. So with sincerity, you say, I regret any lying I've ever done since beginning this time, because I don't want the future suffering. So the more strong your regret is, the more you weaken it. So the more your mind is involved, and you can purify. The more strongly your mind process goes through these 4 steps, you can remember certain acts like in this life. And then you can think, I regret anything ever since, because you know you've done them before, and you don't want those seeds in your mind because you don't want them to ripen. So it's just it's part of your involvement. The more convinced you are, the more confident you are, the more sincere you are. That's what's involved in purification. So when you really finally have purification, you finally purify everything when you realize emptiness. That's a long way to go. But you weaken the tendencies. So the stronger your regret, the stronger your compassion, the stronger your purification, and the stronger your determination to change is what causes you to change, is what changes the scenario. And if the karma is very strong. Now, put it like this. Another thing too is if it's a very strong habit, a very strong karma, it's a bit like if I'm sitting on a mountain. I'm on a hill and I can see you driving this direction, and I check that you're going 22 miles an hour. And I keep forgetting his name.
Rick is in Ricky Ricardo.
Oh, thank you, darling. So there's Rick. Rick's driving this other direction, and I can deduce with my calculator that in 3.5 minutes, if you keep going at this rate, you will crash head on. That's a possibility, isn't it? But you can't see but I've got the big picture here. And it's a dependent arising. But if suddenly Rick stops the car, you won't crash. So he changes conditions. But if the conditions don't change, you can guarantee it's going to happen in 2.5 minutes, you know. But if you put your foot on the brake or you suddenly go faster, but if you're only just around the corner from each other in 1 second, it's a bit late. The karma is going to happen. So if it's far enough away, you can change things. It's just logical. If you start doing all your weeding, you know, and put sort of different, you can affect what's going to grow in your garden. But if things are about to ripen tomorrow, it's a bit late. You can't. You could go. 2 people can have cancer, and they can both go to the same doctor, same methods. One will get healed and one will not, because the karma for one is heavier than the other. It's stronger. So it's very dependent, but everything's not impossible to change. But you got to, and it also is very precise. Karma is like precise. It's true. It's precise. Do you understand? Yeah. So I was going to do a meditation. What kind of meditation shall I do? I think I'll do a meditation like Tara or something. How about that? All right. This is a Tibetan Buddhist practice coming from the Vajrayana, where we call it visualizing. And if you analyze it, visualizing is just your mind. You know, you're just imagining something. And because the Buddha's view is every single thing we think leaves a seed in the mind. So if you imagine compassion, you imagine being kind to people, you imagine, you know, healing everybody, well, that's powerful karma. You sow those seeds in your mind. How marvelous, you know. We tend to think that having thoughts has no meaning. Every thought really does count. It's very powerful. It sows seeds in your mind. You grow those tendencies, you know. So we'll just do this meditation, very easygoing. Okay, let me say first a little bit more about the meaning of Buddha. So in the very basic sutra, in the sutra teachings, which we're describing here, the way we think of Buddha is as this person who lived in India 2,500 years ago. The pictures and the statues of the monk. That's the classic image of a Buddha, okay? The person, the Buddha. But the actual meaning of the word Buddha is just the consciousness, is the pure, unmanifest, all-pervasive, all-compassionate, all-wise consciousness. And trillions of beings have accomplished that. So because we can't communicate with that subtle or pervasive consciousness, then out of compassion, those beings who have accomplished Buddhahood manifest in bodies, get born in bodies to help us. So the human form, the one form the Buddha manifests in is in the body, the Shakyamuni Buddha, for example. Or in this life, a person, you know, who is maybe a Buddha, and you can't tell they're Buddha. I mean, you couldn't tell the Buddha was Buddha when you met him back then. You see a human being, a nice human being. So anybody who's manifesting in a body, that's the manifestation of Buddha. But in the Mahayana teachings, there's another form in which the Buddha manifests, which is a more subtle light body that is visible to the great Arya bodhisattvas. Those bodhisattvas in their meditation who realized emptiness, they can cognize Buddha at a subtler level. Their mind is more advanced. So that's more from the Vajrayana. If you look at all the pictures, the Bodhisattva path and the Vajrayana, look at all the pictures. You've got millions of these different forms, all of which are just different manifestations of different qualities that we're trying to accomplish. That's really what they are, you know. So, for example, there are 3 main qualities of an enlightened mind, a Buddha. One is called compassion, and that's depicted as the Buddha Chenrezig, or in Sanskrit, Avalokitesvara. So he's very peaceful aspect. He's in male form, sitting on a lotus, holding different things, and you know, his manifestation of compassion and loving kindness. The second quality of a Buddha's mind is wisdom, and that's manifested by the Buddha called Manjushri, Manju, gentle voice, or Jamyang in Tibetan. And he's holding a sword with a tip of fire that cuts through ignorance. Well, the third quality is called power, or action. So you've got to have the compassion to want to help sentient beings, the wisdom to know how, but the power to do so. This is like action energy, getting things done, cutting through the obstacles, making things happen, success. And that's often depicted by the female Buddha called Tara. So these male or female, they're just kind of like archetypes, really. They're like images that are like a visual language that represent these qualities. That we all, I mean, they're all got the qualities of being a Buddha, but they show different aspects. One shows the aspect of wisdom. One shows the aspect of this power or compassion. One shows the aspect of, compassion. or wisdom. There's different ones. So let's just do the meditation using Tara. I mean, she's female, but we're male or female. We all need these qualities badly. And it's just the way they're depicted, that's all. So we just imagine in front of us, be very relaxed about it, very easygoing, okay? Imagine in front of us. If we're familiar with these images, fine. If not, then just do your best. Just imagine the embodiment of all these marvelous qualities of infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, but in the aspect of being this female form, very subtle light body, green light body. Green is like action energy. And you can see the pictures and statues. She's very radiantly beautiful. Everything's made of light. And she's sitting on a multicolored lotus. Her left leg is drawn out like in meditation. No, drawn in like in meditation. But her right leg, it's resting on another little multicolored lotus in this very relaxed pose, which kind of shows her eagerness to hop up to help sentient beings. Action energy, And she's like in this form, these Buddhas are, they call it the Bodhisattva style. She's got these gorgeous kind of silken clothes in the lower part of her body. But the top part, mostly they're kind of naked, really. She's got these gorgeous breasts. And she's decorated. It's from India, but it's a Tibetan kind of depiction of it. She's dressed very beautifully. This is the Bodhisattva style. So she's got this kind of 5-pointed crown on her head, her black hair down her back, partially held up in a top knot. And she's got this gorgeous jewelry at her throat, her ears, her wrists, her neck, her ankles. Everything's radiant. Just try and imagine this radiant light, totally blissful, totally beautiful. And this subtle energy. And if you've got a spiritual teacher, you imagine it's their mind manifesting in this aspect to show us. It's like a mirror image of our own potential. So clearly it's like a visual language, and obviously you don't know the meaning of it until you learn it. So we just imagine she represents all the qualities of a Buddha, in particular this action energy, this action, this power, this confidence to get things done, to make things happen, to cut through the obstacles. I mean, we all need that badly, don't we? Courage, optimism. So she's got this radiantly beautiful face, and she's the manifestation of your spiritual teacher's mind, showing you what you can become. So you just imagine from her brow, she sends very radiant, powerful beams of laser light, white laser light, that enter your brow and fill your entire body. And first of all, you imagine what it does is completely purify all the heaviness of your body, all the sickness and all the difficulties of our bodies, but also all the imprints in our mind of all the harm we've ever done since this life and since beginningless time to sentient beings with our bodies. So think of all the killing, the stealing, the harming, the sexual, abusing, whatever life we've done. We've got imprints of all of these in our mind. There's no life we haven't had, Buddha says. There's no action we haven't done. And all these seeds have stayed in our mind. So imagine these are totally annihilated. All the actions we've ever done to harm sentient beings with our bodies, completely purified. Imagine this. Be so delighted. I'm sorry, I didn't finish what she looks like. I'm so sorry. I rushed ahead. I'll just go back for a second. She's sitting cross-legged, her left leg, her right leg out, resting on a multicolored lotus, her face radiant and beautiful. But her right hand is resting on her right knee, and the palm is up. And she's holding between her thumb and ring finger the stem of a blue upala flower that blooms at her right ear. Just imagine this. And then her left hand is up at her heart, the fingers pointing up, and the thumb and ring finger holding the stem of another blue upala flower blooming at her left ear. So she's sitting with a leg crossed on a multicolored lotus, her right leg resting on a little multicolored lotus. This gorgeous silken clothes, like rainbow, really, like rainbow silken clothes in the lower part of her body. This gorgeous jewelry. Everything's radiant. Everything's made of light, not substantial, like a statue. And infinite compassion, infinitely beautiful. And think of it as very personal, So this light coming, imagine now, totally purifying all the imprints of all the harm we've ever done since beginningless time to sentient beings. Totally purified. And the body feeling light and healed, full of this blissful white light. Imagine. Again, Buddha Tara very compassionately sends these radiant beams of laser light, white light from her brow, entering our brow and filling us completely. This time with our marvelous potential to only benefit others with our body. Can we imagine this? Full of this blissful light and the potential to only benefit. So thinking whoever sees me, hears me, touches me, talks to me, smells me, tastes me, all sentient beings, just by my presence. How amazing that I can be of benefit to them, only benefit them. And then in the future, of course, when we become a Buddha, the power to effortlessly manifest in countless bodies to benefit sentient beings. Imagine this, full of this blissful white light, this marvelous potential. And now Lama Tara, Buddha Tara, very compassionately sends from her throat powerful beams of red laser light that penetrate our throat and fill us completely. And this time, purifying all the nonsense of our speech, uncontrolled speech, irrelevant speech, harsh speech, bad mouthing behind backs, rabbiting on about nothing speech, or even our inability to express ourselves clearly with our speech, all of this. Not only in this life, but since beginningless time, all the harm we've done to sentient beings with our speech. Imagine this totally eradicated, totally purified, annihilated by this radiant red light filling us. Again, Buddha Tara very compassionately sends this red beams of light penetrating our throat and filling us, this time filling us with our potential. I mean, they call it the power of speech. And we think about it in our lives. We all need speech. We work with people, we live with people, we have to communicate with people. And if our speech is not listened to, if it's not trusted, if it's not heard, if people don't like our speech, what good is it? We can do nothing, So this is an amazing quality we must have. And the method for achieving this is to refrain from these negative actions of speech and to be silent. It's very powerful. And of course, also purifying with mantras and things, and we can develop the power of speech. So imagine we're full of that now. This is the main quality of a Buddha. Every sound they utter, imagine this, full of this marvelous potential, such that any sound we utter, even good morning, even our laugh, will be of benefit to whoever hears it. This is kind of powerful. Speech is the main gift of the Buddha, the power of speech. Imagine this, full of this marvelous potential, this blissful red light, our own potential. And now Buddha Tara very compassionately sends from her heart chakra in the center of her chest, powerful beams of blue light, blue like the sky, that penetrate our heart and then fill us completely. This time, first, purifying all the nonsense of our mind, which is the source of the problems of our body and speech. The ego grasping, which clings to this ridiculous sense of self, then the attachment to get what that self wants, and the aversion and the panic attacks when it doesn't, and all the other dramas, all this nonsense, these misconceptions, these wrong views, these ancient old habits that are the source of our pain and the cause of why we harm others. All of this eradicated, purified by this blissful blue light. Again, Buddha Tara ascends, this time the blue light, but this time what? Our qualities, the ones that are at the core of our being, the virtues, the goodness, the clarity, the intelligence, the joy. These qualities are what define us. These are who we really are. And now they're fully developed. What else? Imagine, full of this blissful blue light, our true nature manifesting. So one more time, Butchara sends all three lights together. And what this is, we've now achieved, first we think we've achieved liberation from suffering. Now we're going to achieve Buddhahood. We're going to remove even the subtlest imprints, the tendencies, all this, the imprints left over from all these delusions. So we visualize white from the brow, red from the throat, and blue from the heart, penetrating together and manifesting our own Buddha nature, becoming Tara ourselves. Imagine this. So now we imagine that the lotus that the multicolored lotus that Tara is sitting on and the multicolored lotus that her right foot is resting on just dissolve up into light into her body. Imagine that. And then imagine she very happily comes to sit above our heads, facing the same way as we are. And then she very happily dissolves into green light and absorbs our crown. And we imagine all the energy of the body, speech, and mind of Tara, the energy of the body, speech, and mind of our spiritual teacher, and the energy of our own body, speech, and mind. They completely merge. As Lama Yeshe says, they become union oneness. Completely imagine this. And then for about a minute, you imagine just no thoughts. You imagine you expand to fill the universe. No thoughts. Just imagine abiding in this bliss. Clear, radiant, no thoughts. Imagine. So now I've become Buddha. It's great for me, but what about all those sentient beings? All the countless lifetimes of practicing wisdom, practicing compassion, driven by my compassion. My only reason to be a Buddha is to be of benefit to others. So now, of course, I must do that job. So now we visualize all sentient beings. First of all, in the form of enemies, friends, and strangers. And there's no fourth category. There are the objects of our attachment, the objects of our aversion, and the objects of our indifference. So first, right in front of us, our enemies. We mightn't use this word, but you think about it. This means the object of aversion. People who've been mean to us, who've been unkind to us, who've harmed us. So visualize even just one and imagine the others are there. The object of your aversion, right in front of you. And then to the left in front of you, your beloveds, the objects of your attachment. And then to the right and everywhere else, because let's face it, strangers is 99.99% of the universe. So we have attachment for those who do what we want, and we do have some love and compassion for them. We have aversion to those who don't do what we want, and we couldn't care less about the rest. They're the strangers. So visualize them all in the form of human beings, all sentient beings, which is the form they can get enlightened in. So visualizing to the right, and then behind as far as the horizon goes, to the right, the left, above, behind, below, everywhere, the entire universe full of all the other sentient beings, all the strangers, in the form of humans. Imagine this. So now imagine from our heart, billions of tiny green taras go out from our heart, first entering into the hearts of the enemies. Imagine that now, entering into them, first taking away all their suffering and the causes of their suffering, their delusions and their negative karma, and giving them happiness, giving them everything they need. These are the practice of compassion and love. Compassion is, may you not suffer, may I make it happen. So we visualize them being free of the causes of their suffering and their suffering. That's the practice of compassion. And then imagine we give them everything they need. That's the practice of love. So imagine this from your heart. Tara's going out into the hearts of the enemies first. Wanting this, wanting them to be free of suffering, wanting them to be happy. Then your beloveds, taking away their pain, their suffering, and their causes, and giving them everything they need. Tiny taras going into them, transforming them. And then all the strangers, everywhere else, trillions of taras going from the front, the back, the sides, entering into the hearts of all the strangers, taking away their suffering and its causes, and giving them everything they need. Because everybody's the same. We all want happiness. We all don't want suffering. And we all have the same potential to be free of suffering and to be full of happiness. We all have the potential to be a Buddha. Imagining this as we continue to visualize, just for a moment, we'll say 7, we'll just sing 7 mantras of Tara that are the kind of the sound expression of these same qualities of Tara. Would you visualize? Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu, Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Svaha. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Svaha. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Svaha. Om Tare Tutare 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 Ture Svaha. No, just say quietly to ourselves as we continue to visualize. Om Tare Tutare Ture Svaha. 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 So one more time, we visualize all these Tara, and they all turn. Now this time the Tara is going out, transforms them into their own Tara. They all turn into Tara. Imagine this. And then as they do, then we visualize as we sing the mantra. This time we send out offerings to all of these Taras. We visualize offering all the objects of the senses, all the sounds, the smells, the tastes, all the marvelous things of the universe that make beings happy. We imagine pouring out all these offerings to all these Taras. Om Tare Tutare Ture Svaha. 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 And now you imagine all these Taras dissolve into green light and from all directions absorb into each one of us, enhancing even more brilliantly our Tara nature. Imagine that. And then relax. Okay. It's 4:10, but I think we can finish if you want to. Now. Okay. Is there any questions? No? Okay. The thing is, you see, it's using a visualization, but it's your mind. I mean, if for 30 minutes we just sat and had positive thoughts, how could you think that couldn't have an effect? Do you understand? It's like it's very obvious, really. It's your mind thinking these things. So every thought counts, remember? So it's doing little meditations like that, imagining purifying, imagining achieving goodness, imagining benefiting others. How incredible. How amazing. You're so delighted. Because every thought you have counts. And of course, the stronger the thoughts, the more convinced you are, the stronger the karmic imprint, the more likely the purification, the more likely the result. It's pretty obvious. We know that. The more strongly you determine to do something, the likely you are to do it. It's pretty obvious. It's not cosmic. And this is what Buddha means by karma, you know. It means secret and special and spiritual. It's practical. It's a natural law, he says. Okay. So we delight in our day. What we've done, what we've thought about, what we've thought of, you know, anything that's been meaningful, even if it's 1%, how fantastic. Kewajinyo dudai lama sange drugyone drowa chikyang malupa dei sala gopasho Jangchob semchog rinpoche ma ke panam ke guchig ke panyampa me payang gong ne gong du bava sho. Okie doke. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Just the end of the whole show.
Yes. Thank you, people. Goodbye. No questions from anybody? No questions? No messages?
No.
Okay. There's a message. It says it there. A message. What does it say?
Thank you from Regina.
Okay, good, darling. Thank you so much, Regina. Okay. That's it.